What you are hearing right now is from a Super Nintendo game. I am not kidding, this isn't remastered, no modifications, and no CD quality audio. This is raw Super Nintendo hardware. And chances are you have never heard of this. You've never even heard of the game it came from. It's a weird little platformer called Plok. And the second you see this, it's like, no way! That soundtrack doesn't belong here. It's too big, it's too loud, it's too smart, it's just too damn good. Because here's the thing, Plok didn't just have great music, it had some of the most advanced, most mind-blowing sound design on their Super Nintendo. And the scariest part is that almost no one noticed it. Because when we talk about iconic Super Nintendo soundtracks, the conversation is pretty predictable. Mario's playful bounce, Zelda's sweeping strings, Donkey Kong's jungle ambience. All safe, all polished, absolutely brilliant. But Plok didn't play by those rules. Its soundtrack opens with what feels like a full-on prog rock explosion. It's aggressive, it shreds. It layers samples, guitar riffs, and breakbeats in ways that shouldn't even be possible on its hardware. Because to understand that, we have to talk about the technical bit real quick. The Super Nintendo sound chip has 8 channels. That's your entire playground. Now most composers use it for safe melodies, but Plok sounds like Rush, Genesis, and early Aphex Twin all decided to throw a surprise concert inside a cartoon platformer. It seriously just never lets up. Because the thing is, the soundtrack isn't just sketchy, it's show-offy, and it has every goddamn right to be. The game's music is flexing so hard you'd think it was daring the hardware to crash, and the mad genius behind it, Tim Follin, a guy you've probably never heard of, unless you're deep in retro music rabbit holes. But he might be one of the most technically gifted, creative, and underrated composers in all of video game history. Because here's what makes it even more surreal. The game looks like it was made for toddlers. Plok throws his own body parts as weapons, and you find sentient furniture, you chase worms, and it's just weird and goofy as hell. And the entire time, the soundtrack is acting like this is the final boss of humanity. The tension on it is unreal. The music is dragging this game into another dimension, one it was never built for. And honestly, that's exactly what makes it unforgettable, because what you're hearing is pure unfiltered talent, locked inside a game that nobody took seriously. Not then, and not now, and maybe not even Nintendo. But we're not sure, because there were rumors around that Shigeru Miyamoto himself was shocked about the sound design from Plok, but it's never been confirmed. But seriously though, what happens when a soundtrack goes so hard for its own game? Well, that's basically the story of Plok. Because to understand how Plok happened, you have to meet the 2 brothers who made it happen, Tim and Geoff Follin. No studio, no budget, just 2 kids in the UK in the 80s armed with cheap computers, a cassette recorder, and an obsession with pushing sound to the absolute limit. Now these guys, they were not game designers, they were sound architects. From the Commodore 64 to the NES, they were known for doing things with the music chips that no one was thought possible. We're talking about hand-coded waveforms, writing entire compositions in hexadecimal line by line, not using tools but creating them. They weren't just writing music, they were inventing instruments inside of code. Tim was the younger of the 2, the composer, and to this day no one really understands how he pulled all of this off, because he didn't just write music, he made music act. His melodies weren't just pretty, they were technical statements, proof that the machine could go further on. He treated limitations like a challenge, as if every constraint was daring him to go louder, faster, and even weirder. So when the Fallins were handed a quirky little Super Nintendo platformer called Plok, for some reason, they did not play it safe. They hijacked the game, they turned the sound chip into their own stage, and they played like it was the last concert of their lives. And here's what makes it just almost poetic. Plok wasn't meant to be a masterpiece. It was a mid-tier game from a tiny team, buried in a year packed with AAA releases. Nobody expected brilliance. Nobody asked for it. Nobody deserves this soundtrack. But Tim, he delivered it anyway. Why? Because he could. This wasn't industry music. This was outsider art on a Nintendo console, and that's the tragedy. Because the Fallen Brothers' work was always one step ahead, and always one step out of place. Too weird for mainstream, too smart for the hardware, too ambitious for the games they were trapped inside. So when people talk about great Super Nintendo music, sometimes Plok just gets left out, and it's not because it wasn't great, it just nobody knew where to put this. And it's sad that the sound never came back, because after its release, Plok vanished. No re-releases, no sequels, no legacy collections. And the soundtrack just disappeared. It's gone. You either played it in 1993 and remembered it, or you just never heard it at all. But if you actually sit down and listen to it, track after track, it becomes obvious. Plok was decades ahead of its time. Even today, some of these songs wouldn't feel out of place in a modern indie roguelike or a synthwave album. It had the level of edge, the urgency. And that's where the story gets a little painful, because Tim Fallon didn't go on to become a household name. He didn't become the next Koji Kondo of the West. He quit, burned out, crushed by deadlines, bad publishers, and an industry that never valued the sound of its own innovation. The guy who gave us one of the most technical, ambitious soundtracks in gaming history just walked away. And that's why Plok hurts a little, because it's not just a weird game with great music. It's the last broadcast of a once-in-a-generation composer, screaming into the void of a game that nobody took seriously. So all we can do now is remember. Beautiful soundtrack, that was Plok.